Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about a very underrated rivalry that took place in the WWF back in the year 1991, and that is the rivalry between Jake the Snake Roberts and the Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, to give you a little history lesson, back in March of 91, Randy Savage was still a heel in the WWF, known as the Macho King Randy Savage. And he was involved in a very, very personal rivalry with the Ultimate Warrior. So, at the 1991 Royal Rumble in January, the Macho King Randy Savage cost the Ultimate Warrior the WWF Championship. And later on in that night, when Randy Savage was supposed to compete in the 1991 Royal Rumble match, he no-showed the match. And apparently the Warrior had chased him out of the building. And things got really, really personal with these two leading up to WrestleMania 7 in March of 1991. Get to WrestleMania 7, it's a career-ending match in which the loser of the match has to retire. The Ultimate Warrior would survive four or five elbow drops from the Macho King and would finish off the Macho King with three or four flying shoulder tackles, if I remember correctly, in order to win the matchup, ending the career of the Macho King Randy Savage. The aftermath of that match, the sensational Queen Sherry, who was the manager of the Macho King, attacked Savage in the middle of the ring, kicking him and clawing away at him when Miss Elizabeth would come to the rescue of Randy Savage, thus reuniting the two while they embraced in one of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history. You have the Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth reuniting in a very, very epic moment at WrestleMania 7. One of the best and one of the greatest feel-good moments of that era was the two reuniting, thus turning the Macho King Randy Savage babyface, now once again the Macho Man Randy Savage. And this was in March of 1991. All of this went down. Fast forward to the July episode of WWF Superstars, the July 6th, 1991 episode. Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth, they're in the middle of the ring. Mean Gene is conducting an interview with both of them, and Randy Savage pops the big question to Miss Elizabeth. Elizabeth, will you marry me? And without hesitation, she answers, oh yeah. And the crowd, they just pop. They just pop for that. It's apparent they were in love with each other and they were ready to tie the knot. And the engagement, like I said, was done in July of 1991 on an episode of WWF Superstars, early July. So the stage is set for SummerSlam, the match made in heaven, one half of the main event of SummerSlam, entitled The Match Made in Heaven, being the wedding of the Macho Man Randy Savage and the First Lady of Wrestling, Miss Elizabeth. The stage is set for that. Now, prior to this, after WrestleMania 7, when the Ultimate Warrior's feud with the Macho King concluded, he was viciously attacked by The Undertaker and locked in a casket. And he was locked in that casket for quite some time. This was in April of 1991 when Ultimate Warrior appeared as a guest on Paul Bearer's funeral parlor, and The Undertaker would viciously attack the Warrior with the urn and then would just place him inside an air-sealed, airtight casket. You saw several WWF officials come to the ring and they tried to pry the Ultimate Warrior out of the casket, and they took a while before the Warrior, they was able to open up that casket and get the Warrior out of there. At that point, when they opened the casket, the Warrior, he had already passed out. So the Warrior had developed a fear of caskets and a fear of The Undertaker. So several weeks later, There was only one man in the WWF who could show the Warrior the ways of the dark side, and that would be one Jake the Snake Roberts, who had previously lost his snake Damien when the earthquake had murdered Damien right in the middle of the ring, would do the earthquake splash down on Damien, killing Damien the Snake, who was Jake's faithful companion for so many years out in WWF arenas all over the world. So, with that being said, Jake the Snake, yeah, he lost Damien. Then he had another snake called Lucifer, an even bigger python of that. But with all of that being done, Jake, it's like something was missing with Jake. It's like losing Damien did something to him. He would eventually, get rid of the other snake, Lucifer, and he had promised to show the Warrior the way of the dark side. So we see all these vignettes in the summer, throughout the summer of 1991, where Jake the Snake has the Ultimate Warrior in a cemetery and he's burying him, and he's like burying him down in the ground in dirt, and you just see the Warrior's neck sticking up, and he's just like doing all this like fancy talk about how the ways in order to conquer your fears, how to stop the dark side, how do you overcome your fear of the Undertaker. He's talking to the Ultimate Warrior, giving him all this motivation of how to overcome his fear. And we've seen another one where he places him back in a casket and then he locks him in the casket, and you hear Warrior screaming in the casket that he really wants to get out. And then also, to wrap it up, we would see Jake the Snake do it all, where he would stuff the Ultimate Warrior inside of a room full of snakes, and he would lock the Warrior inside that room full of snakes. And then when that happened, like the fancy camera work that he did with this whole thing, you just seen the Warrior open up a box, and you see a king cobra like just jump out of the box and bite him right in the face. And at that point, you knew that the Warrior was double crossed by Jake the Snake Roberts. And then as the camera came off the Warrior, we see the camera pan on Jake, and we would see Jake the Snake. Standing next to Jake the Snake would be the ominous one, the Undertaker, and his manager, Paul Bearer. So this right here tells us that Jake the Snake had turned heel and aligned forces with the Undertaker. And the Undertaker told the Ultimate Warrior, here, reach out for me. What did he say? He said something along the lines of, reach out for me, trust me, never trust a snake, and then pulled his hand back. And at that moment, we knew that Jake had joined forces with the Ultimate Warrior. So this was leading up to SummerSlam 91, right around the time when Randy and Elizabeth had their wedding. Jake the Snake had just done all this stuff with the Ultimate Warrior. Behind the scenes, the Ultimate Warrior had a dispute and was let go by WWF at the time at SummerSlam 91, when there was a lot of animosity between him and Vince McMahon. There's rumors that he held Vince McMahon up for pay, didn't want to no-show SummerSlam if Vince met his demands. Who knows? You heard so many different stories over the years about that. Anyway, the Ultimate Warrior would be fired by Vince McMahon after SummerSlam 91. And there you go. This gave them the opportunity to open the door to bring Jake and the Macho Man in a rivalry together. So, at SummerSlam, the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth would have their wedding, a successful wedding at that, with everyone just there in awe and just appreciating like the class and the the love for these two. You can feel good, and you're definitely invested in that moment in time when they tied the knot. But something horrific was about to happen. We would find out that coming weekend on WWF Superstars what went on in the wedding reception that took place after the wedding. So the footage shows Randy and Elizabeth opening up their presents, they're dancing, they're feeding each other cake, you know, all that good stuff that you do in the wedding receptions and wedding parties. And then Elizabeth goes to open up a gift. And when she opens up the gift, you see a king cobra just crawl right out, like right in front of her. And at that point, she was startled, she was terrified, and she dropped the box on the floor as the snake ran out of the box. And then at that moment, we seen Jake the Snake and the Undertaker crash at a wedding. We seen the Undertaker with his urn. He would crack it across the top of the head of the Macho Man. And Jake the Snake would just taunt Elizabeth, who was backed into a corner with a snake, it looked like a cobra, just tapping it like this and shoving it in her face. And this poor woman is just terrified at the sight of that snake. And then you have all of that chaos, and then thankfully Sid Justice would come to the rescue of the Macho Man. He would grab a chair and he would swing it at Jake and the Undertaker, and he was like, "Just get out of here or I'll kill you," or something along those lines. Sid uttered, I remember. And Undertaker and Jake, they were just intimidating, and they struck fear into the hearts of the WWF audience at that time in 1991 when they were together. So this here set the stage for the rivalry between the Macho Man Randy Savage and Jake the Snake Roberts. And then you fast forward to a couple of months later. Actually during this time, Randy Savage wanted reinstatement really bad. He was asking President Jack Tunney, please reinstate me. I want to get my hands on Jake the Snake Roberts. I want to get back at him for what he did to me and what he did to Miss Elizabeth. And it was just like weeks and weeks and weeks was just passing by. So at this point in time, Randy Savage was a commentator alongside Vince McMahon and Roddy Piper on WWF Superstars. He was a color commentator, and he was calling matches and things of that nature. You know, he has the announcing gig going on. So it was at one point where Jake the Snake was in the ring, and he was having a match against a jobber. So when he had that match against the jobber, after the match, Jake would get on the mic and he would taunt Randy, who was sitting at the announce table. And he would say, "You are nothing more than a yellow, stinking, gutless coward." And then that was just enough to prompt the Macho Man, because he remembered what this guy did to him, how he ruined their wedding reception, how he attacked him, how he taunted Miss Elizabeth, etc., etc. So Randy was ready, and he was out for vengeance against this guy. So eventually Jake lured Randy. Randy would come down to the ring, and then while Randy was trying to get in the ring, a WWF referee would grab his foot, trying to tell him, no, don't go. Don't do it. It's not worth it. So with that, Jake the Snake does a clothesline to Randy, knocking him off of the ring apron. And then I think he rams his shoulder into the ring post, and then he would shove the Macho Man into the ring and tie him up in the ropes, deliver some knees to the gut. And then the most horrific part happened. And this was in November of 1991 on WWF Superstars. So Jake the Snake would put on the black glove, and he would open the bag, and he would just take out that grotesque looking King Cobra, and he would unleash it on the Macho Man Randy Savage. And the way that thing stood in the ring, it was very frightening, just to see that snake with his mouth open and with his just like to look at it with the eyes like bugging out, kind of. Yeah, it was just like horrific. I was just terrified watching this as a little kid. So Jake, without hesitation, has Randy tied up in the ropes, and he brings the snake over, and you see the snake just biting the arm of the Macho Man Randy Savage. He's just biting away at the arm, and you see the people in the audience, they're just like, they're just like oohing and ahhing, and they're like cringing, and the way they look, it's like they can't believe this shit is happening, right? We see little kids in the audience crying, and then eventually Jake would pull the snake off of Randy, who's bleeding a lot from the shoulder, from the arm, I should say. And then Randy apparently seems to get delirious, gets up swinging at Jake. Jake's stomping away at him. Miss Elizabeth runs down. Roddy Piper runs down. A whole bunch of WWF officials run down. And everyone's afraid to get into the ring to get the Macho Man out of there because Jake has that Cobra. And he's just like chasing them away with the Cobra. And you see them backing away from it. And then eventually, Roddy Piper, he just went in there really quick and he grabs the Macho Man. They place the Macho Man on the stretcher and takes him out of the arena. And Vince McMahon on the commentary, he's just losing his mind. The way Vince used to commentate back then, he really made you believe that somebody was getting fucking murdered out there. That's how good Vince was at the commentary table. But anyhow, yeah, Jake the Snake stands in the ring and he's just smiling. He's just smiling down at the King Cobra, and the King Cobra's there looking at him like this. What a visual, man. What a vicious heel, a vicious and nasty heel Jake the Snake Roberts was. One of the greatest heels of all time, man. His promo work is underrated to this day. So President Jack Tunney would take action right away. He would bar all reptiles from ringside, and he would finally come to the decision that the Macho Man has been reinstated in the WWF, and that the match between the Macho Man Randy Savage and Jake the Snake Roberts will not take place at Survivor Series, but a week later, after Survivor Series, at an event called This Tuesday in Texas, which would take place in December of 1991. So at the Survivor Series 91, we got some promos from Jake the Snake and the Macho Man respectively. Macho Man said the only thing he heard was Elizabeth crying, and he's gonna get revenge, and he's gonna extract revenge for Jake the Snake Roberts. He's out to hurt this man. And then Jake the Snake later on will come out and cut a promo and said how this is the beginning of the end for the Macho Man Randy Savage and Elizabeth. But not only the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, if that makes sense. Yeah, man, Jake is something else with those promos, I'm telling you. So 6 days later at the Tuesday in Texas, Macho Man and Jake the Snake, they have their matchup against one another. And what the crowd was just red hot in Texas for this. Jake the Snake comes down to the ring. Randy Savage comes right behind him, attacks him from behind, and we get a hostile crowd. They're just cheering everything. The Macho Man is just beating the shit out of this guy. And then eventually Jake gets on the offense, delivers some blows to the Macho Man. He got him with a deep atomic drop at one point, and he was working over the arm of Randy, which would tell a story for in the aftermath of this matchup. But then Jake ended up cracking his ribs after several minutes into the, I think it was in the turnbuckle. He missed a charge. And then Randy would drop down the flying elbow drop and would get the pin. And the Macho Man is victorious. So after the match, Randy wants to do a number on this guy, you know, for what he did to him. And then he just goes for the ring bell. He tries to get a steel chair. Then WWF officials, they stop him, I think. They grab it from him. Then he goes for the ring bell, and another official, they grab it and they take it away from him. So this gives Jake the Snake Roberts the opportunity to slowly get to his feet, and out of nowhere, he delivered a DDT. DDT out of nowhere on the Macho Man. And then Jake would deliver three more, I think it was 2 or 3 more DDTs right onto the Macho Man, to the disgust of Gorilla Monsoon on the commentary. And Bobby Heenan is there, and he's just loving it with all his unique commentary that he's saying. So we would see Jake go under the ring, grab a bag, put on a black glove, I think, once again. I don't know if he put on the black glove, but anyway, he did go out for a bag underneath the ring, and he threw that bag into the ring. And the referee, as soon as the referee saw that, he just like jumped out of the ring. He just ran the hell out of there, because like he said, I don't want no part of this shit. I don't want to get bitten by a snake. And as Jake is about to open up the bag, we see Miss Elizabeth running down to the ring, and Miss Elizabeth slides into the ring, and she's asking Randy, are you okay? Are you all right? And she's pleading with Jake to leave him alone. Jake the Snake, being the nasty, vicious heel that he is, he says, you want to save his ass? You better beg. You better beg, damn it. You better beg if you want to save him. Huh? Come on, Randy. Come on. And then Elizabeth is saying, no, just leave him alone. Please, he's had enough. Just leave him alone. And then Jake the Snake would be like, oh, you know what? He makes me sick. You make me sick. He makes me sick. Then he would grab Elizabeth by the hair. He just pulled her up from the floor, from the canvas where she's down looking at Randy, and he delivers a slap. Boom, right to the face of Miss Elizabeth. And Gorilla Monsoon, I'll never forget, he's like, he should be suspended for life. What the hell is wrong with this guy? Gorilla was just so pissed off. And then Bobby Heenan would continue to say he didn't break the rules. He just bent him a bit. And then Jack Tunney would come out and tell Jake the Snake to get out of here. You've caused enough trouble. And Jake, this guy has the audacity to extend a hand. And he wants a handshake from the WWF president, Jack Tunney, after the despicable act that he committed by slapping Miss Elizabeth. What a fucking heel, man. What a great heel Jake the Snake Roberts was. I'm telling you, underrated shit from back in the day, man. I just love this kind of stuff. And then they're playing it up in the ring where Jake the Snake, where the Macho Man is in the ring, and he's continued being helped up by Elizabeth and the referee is there just checking on him to make sure he's okay. And then Gorilla Monsoon would say Elizabeth's face swelling even as we speak. And if you really look at it, it looked like her face was actually swelling. It's like, you know, they did like such a good job with this whole thing. Just great storytelling, great storytelling here. And then we cut backstage. Mean Gene Okerlund is interviewing Jake the Snake Roberts. Gene Okerlund is fucking disgusted with this guy. He's just saying, hitting a woman, how could you? And then Jake goes on to say, oh yeah, if it's a woman I want, I'll let her to stand up and be what I want. And then he tells the Macho Man, please bring your old lady back. Let me touch her again, because it was all worth it. And he'd do it again, he said. My gosh. And then later on in the evening, we would get a backstage interview with Randy, and he says he blames Elizabeth. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. He blames himself for what happened to Elizabeth. He blames himself for what happened to Elizabeth, and he's going to get Jake. He's going to get Jake, and yeah, this isn't over yet. Something along those lines. But anyway, yeah, the Macho Man, yeah, he's like really emotional at that moment, and he swears revenge on Jake the Snake Roberts. My gosh, what a great time to be a fan. And then about a month later, about say 5 weeks later, 5 or 6 weeks later, we have the WWF Royal Rumble 1992 match. Some of the entrants in the match were, you know, very heavy hitters, and this Royal Rumble, as we know, was for the WWF title after there was controversy in the Hogan-Undertaker match from Survivor Series, and then again in Tuesday in Texas in 91. So Randy and Jake would both be in the Royal Rumble match, and Jake the Snake would be eliminated by the Macho Man Randy Savage in this one. Yeah, with a high knee that sent him over the top rope. But Randy didn't, that wasn't enough for Randy. He continued the attack on Jake the Snake Roberts, but it was broken up by The Undertaker. And yeah, so the Macho Man did actually make it to the Final Four that year in the Royal Rumble. And we see Jake the Snake interact with other superstars in that Royal Rumble match, notably Roddy Piper, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, just to name a few, Ric Flair even. It was very interesting to see a Jake the Snake Ric Flair interaction in that Royal Rumble. I'm really glad we got to see that. So then, about 2 weeks later after this Royal Rumble, the stage is set yet for another Macho Man Randy Savage Jake the Snake Roberts match, and it would take place on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. So February 8th, 1992, just about two to 3 weeks after the Royal Rumble happened, we got this matchup here on free TV at that. So we seen the Macho Man once again go at Jake the Snake in full force, and eventually the Macho Man would defeat Jake the Snake Roberts with an elbow drop and win the match. And then he tried again to extract some more revenge, but yeah, Jake the Snake would slither his way and escape back to the locker room. And then Jake the Snake, he's back there and he's waiting. And he looks at the camera and said, you know what? I'm going to get him. I'm going to fucking get them right now when they come through the curtain. So Randy and Elizabeth, they're celebrating in the ring, the victory over Jake. And then Jake the Snake, he's waiting backstage with a steel chair. And he wants to wallop the Macho Man with the steel chair. And as soon as they come through the curtain, they're coming through the curtain and he's waiting there with the steel chair. So they're coming through the curtain, and then Jake the Snake swings the chair. He picks it up, swings it, but behind him, it's the Undertaker. Undertaker grabs the chair from Jake and pulls it away. And the Undertaker saved the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth from Jake the Snake Roberts. And then Randy would nail Jake with a steel chair and leave him laying. And then we would pan up, the camera would pan up to the Undertaker, just looking down at Jake the Snake Roberts, who was grabbing his side or his ribs or something like that. And the Macho Man would walk away after that happened. And this concludes the rivalry between the Macho Man and Jake the Snake Roberts. A very, very underrated rivalry, one of my favorites. Even though the rivalry lasted all of 6 months, it was one of the most red-hot feuds in the WWF at the time when it was going on. And indeed, one of my favorites. One of the best feuds of the Golden Era. And one that I can go back and reflect on fondly. So much shit happened within that 6-month period. From August of 1991 all the way to February, mid-February of 1992. Jake the Snake Roberts and the Macho Man Randy Savage. A very, very underrated rivalry for the ages. All right, hope everyone enjoyed this video. And I'll be back in the very near future with another video. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.